Ladies and gentlemen of the press, honorable ministers present in this threshold, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the office of the President for the first briefing that is about to be given by Stephen K. QC, barrister at law, is the head of the chamber in now 1112 South Square, Grace Inn, London WC 1A. It came last time because he has just changed the address and came to this country. So in the last report that was given by His Excellency the President, Stephen K. was introduced to be having the address of 9 Bedford Row, London WC 1R. But he has changed the address I have just given. For the purpose of this press conference, Stephen K. is going to talk to the press about the report that was just being declassified as it came in the press briefing of His Excellency the President, that certain document and certain intercept as of the 2013 and 2016 political crisis in the country are going to be declassified and released for the public consumption. Those reports, you might be aware that they are now online, but the best person to give you and answer questions that you cannot get their answers online is Stephen K. I will be introducing him so that he walk you through the press briefing of today. When the session of questions come, we will be happy to take your questions. Any question that deal with the political complexity of the South Sudan complex situation, I will be taking those questions. Any questions that is regarding the law and regarding those documents, it is Steve that will be taking those questions. Without further ado, I will introduce Stephen K.
Thank you very much, Tenny. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the press. I'm here to not only introduce myself to you, but to introduce the report that was released last week, pushing the reset button for South Sudan. That report was an independent report commissioned of me and covered specifically events relating to 2 attempted coups, one on the 15th of December 2013 and one on the 8th of July 2016. In looking at the evidence concerning the coups, I was particularly directed to telephone intercept conversations that were made in South Sudan. The recordings were preserved in South Sudan, and I was given access to them. The report discloses the information within the telephone intercepts. It also looks at the international community's reaction at the time to the events involving the conflicts that broke out in December 2013 and July 2016. And it also looks at the progression of events between those two dates. So, if I can introduce myself, as there's been a lot of speculation I have seen in the media surrounding South Sudan. A lot of it erroneous, a lot of it plain wrong, and I will introduce myself so that you know who I am. I'm a Queen's Counsel from the Bar of England and Wales. I'm a lawyer with over 40 years' experience. I have spent 25 years working in international criminal law, and that came about from the first case at the Yugoslavia War Crimes Tribunal that set the modern international criminal law and war crimes laws. I was in that first case, and I remained practicing in this area, going to the Rwanda Tribunal, practicing at the International Criminal Court, and in that 25 years I experienced the kinds of situations that the evidence in relation to the 2 attempted coups have been able to produce. I am very familiar with telephone intercept evidence. We had them in the Milosevic case, we had them in the Kenyatta case. I'm very familiar with why people try and keep their activities quiet and secret and discreet, and believe the telephone is a medium that can do that. Conspirators and those planning attacks don't broadcast their intentions, they speak on the telephone. At the Kenyatta case at the International Criminal Court, I produced telephone intercept evidence that was the first ever produced within an international court involving telecommunications. And that provided the stories of activities of those people involved in events in that country. So it was no surprise to me that, looking at my background, that the government of South Sudan wanted me to look at evidence that they had in their possession, that the president had spoken on several occasions about the fact that there had been 2 attempted coups, first of all the 15th of December 2013 and then the 8th of July 2016, but had been ignored by the international community, and instead what we call a false narrative began to develop within the media and elsewhere that was taken up by international institutions and the truth concealed. So my experience has been that the analysis of such evidence is very important as it leads the way to the truth. And when you get international institutions disregarding the word of a president, it is something worthy of examination to see who is telling the truth. My analysis of the audio intercepts of key participants within the conflict of the 15th of December 2013 onwards is clearly set out in my report. You will see there words taken from the telephone tapes that were made at the time of the individuals who were conspiring to take power and do so with violence. And they planned an attack, and that attack is revealed in the extracts that I have put in the report. Of course, there are far many more intercepts that show even more plotting and events. But this is the essence of what took place. And it reveals that what the president said shortly afterwards, on the 16th of December 2016, was in fact true. The context of the conflict within South Sudan, however, was quickly put into a narrative that it was a conflict between two sides. And the point I want to bring to your attention, and why it is important, and why I think the reset button needs to be pushed, is that the unlawful taking of power by violence by a group of individuals, politicians and military commanders, that involve the taking of life, the deliberate killing of people, killing of soldiers so that you can get access to the weaponry, killing of others such as soldiers, police and even civilians so that you can get access to key bases and then control strategically the capital of the country, is a matter that happens that gives a state the right and indeed the duty to protect its people and to protect the government. What I looked at was far too easily brushed under the carpet. It was far too easily dismissed for what was being said by the government of South Sudan, that these events were an attempt to unlawfully seize control. My experience in the international criminal courts has given me the opportunity to analyse international narratives such as that surrounded South Sudan. I've seen it in relation to the assassination of Rafik Hariri in Lebanon, in relation to the Tamil Tigers War in Sri Lanka, in relation to conflict in the former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia, Serbia and Croatia. And what I've observed is that a narrative gets a push behind it that then is regarded as being the truth, but the truth has never properly been examined. And I've been in court cases where I've examined those facts and I've been able to show where the truth lies and that the narrative that was being pushed was not a true narrative. And this has been a concern of mine for a number of years, because too easily the narrative that is taken up carries consequences for a state, for individuals within a state, for the development of that state, and indeed for justice in that state. Because if a state is being viewed through the wrong lens of truth, the state is not being appreciated and respected internationally and able to achieve its full potential. There's a famous saying, I think by Mark Twain, that in the time that it takes for a lie to get halfway round the world, the truth is still pulling its pants on. And that is so with false information and indeed with the manipulation of the narrative, with the manipulation of facts. So the report that I produced with my team analysed the intercept evidence and was able to establish a pattern of facts. However, we didn't leave the matter there. We were aware that there had been a South Sudan investigation commission that was organised under presidential decree in January 2014, and that investigation commission had held a series of examinations of key witnesses to events that had unfolded on the night of the 15th of December 2013 and in the days thereafter. And what was remarkable was this, that the witnesses speaking weren't aware of the intercepted communications and the stories that they told. The witnesses were not aware of the total picture that the intercepted communications revealed. However, both sets of evidence from the investigation commission and the telephone intercepts cross-corroborate each other. They are mutually corroborative, and both of them have come about from different sources. So that is important when people analyse the facts and truth about the events that took place, because you're not looking at just one source, you're looking at two sources. And so I've referred to why this is important for the government of South Sudan to have the truth revealed. I've referred to the respect that is due to the state, about the truth being known. But I also would like to refer to the fact that false allegations undermine a society. They undermine the confidence of the people in a society. They spread fear. They spread information that is destructive. And it presents an image to the rest of the world that a society is at conflict with itself. And that is not a good thing. It was a great shame to me that, looking at the work of the African Union Commission of Inquiry into South Sudan, that they did not take the time to analyse the telephone intercepts that I did, because they would have found their way to the truth, and events may have been very, very different in the subsequent years for the development and progress of this state. Because one of the problems about the incorrect stories, the wrong narratives, is that they're adopted by other people. That people just look at what was said by the one before them, and then that becomes the so-called truth. I've seen it in the last few days in the reaction to my report. That's the same thing that is going on. But the facts and truth speak for themselves. That is what I have sought to lay out for you, for the government, for the people of South Sudan. And I hope that you will consider the content of that report and what it reveals, and that the recent tensions in the state can be calmed down and people on a basis of truthfulness, seek to reconcile and develop this society. So that is my summary of the report and a number of the issues that it has brought to my attention and that I wanted to bring to your attention. But I'd like, before I take questions from you, to think about the victims. And this is important. Spreading false news and not telling the truth disrespects those victims. And I would like, if I may, to just have 1 minute's silence as we as a collective in this room pay our respects to the victims. Thank you. Thank you. Tina.
Yes, now is the session for questions. I will be actually ready to pick your hand if you are. Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Troy. I work with the radio community. Yeah, it's good you mentioned that your report has a lot of reaction on social media, seen as well released. What is the truth about your report, given the fact that most of the information that you gather are based on telephones intercept? And that telephone intercept, most of them are provided by the national security of the country. With that, how would the independence of this report could be to those you mentioned are the victims of this conflict? Second question, some activists has been mentioning online, criticizing you that you have been paid $1.7 million to do this report that can change the narrative of the conflict in the country. How could you justify that you did not take money for federal purposes? Thank you.
Let me deal with the first question first, because that's actually the most important. The telephone intercepts have the telephone numbers of the individuals all cited in the report. And there are many more calls that they make during the course of the day. And I've seen the references with the phone calls, and I have cited the downloads that were made, and I've given you the direct speech from those calls as to what the people on the telephones at the time said. They are authentic. They are authentic, and if anyone wants to challenge them, we can also go to the expense of having cell site evidence if it's still available. I used cell site evidence in the Kenyatta case to prove the truth of what I was saying then to the International Criminal Court. It is evidence from the positioning of a phone, but not only that, the other contents within the telephone transcripts have personal matters between the particular people who are making the telephone call. fake news about 1.7 million. I don't answer questions, respond to questions on fake news, because quite frankly, to give respect to something that is a lie like that is not right. It's not the right thing to do. And I suggest the journalists themselves who publish that should go and look at themselves, look at their training, look at their motivation, look at their claimed source, and look at whether they can be respected as a journalist. Because the public rely on journalism to tell the truth. It's an important duty. But to have it subverted is bad. And so while you might clamour for press freedoms are a privilege as well, to be able to address people and talk about other people, such as myself. That's a privilege. So talk the truth and respect the truth. Don't make up stories. And I really do suggest the editor of that newspaper starts having a regulatory overhaul of what is published. Thank you.
Yes, John Wall.
Right, thank you for the chance. My name is John Wall. I work for Al Jazeera. I just have two questions. One is, do you think that your report will be adopted by the international community as they did with the AU inquiry report on that issue? That is the first one. The second question is, what is the kind of mechanism that you use to get this information? Thank you.
Right. I'll answer your second question. The mechanics of that are a matter of national security in any society. All right? So I won't go into the mechanics of that, as it's not right to do so. But you've probably seen enough television and movies that tell you how it's done in a filmic way. Looking at your first question, will my report be adopted by the international institutions? I think they will consider the content of my report. I have a meeting with a significant international institution next week in London, arranged as a result of them coming across the report. A number of the people within those international organisations know me from other cases that I have done. I've mentioned the Kenyatta case, which was in East Africa, and I believe that they will seek to discuss matters with me as to the significance of it. But in many respects, you become a little bit used to being almost controlled by the international institutions. And whilst apologies are sought from you, the South Sudanese people, and I'm talking to all of you here, on whatever side you are in the political debate, and you're told to apologise to each other and acknowledge the other's wrongs. I would like to think that the UN institutions, the AU, that got the facts wrong, that had an opportunity to get the facts right, apologised to South Sudan, to its president. I think it would be right, if there's a mistake, that it's quite clear. I cite in my report the exact paragraph of the African Union report, paragraph 68, where they say they didn't believe the story that was provided by your president, and the exact paragraphs from 128 onwards in the African Union report that demonstrate they were provided with a CD-ROM of these intercepts at the time when they were making their inquiry by the head of your national security services, and obviously didn't consider them in depth enough or listen to them properly. And so there needs to be an apology there, because that has flavoured and coloured how people view South Sudan. And that's why I say the reset button needs to be pushed. I mean, those conspiring to carry out the coup, which involved violence and killing people, they were able to manipulate the international community, the news, by allowing them the false impression that there wasn't a coup attempt, by perpetrating a story that it was interethnic violence. Actually, if you look at my report carefully, you'll see there were a mixture of forces. It wasn't about ethnic violence. It was actually about seeking to take power. To take power. And the presidency of the SPLM. So I think that there needs to be very careful thought about this. It was a very good question you asked. My observation has been that in the way that the international institutions have dealt with the government of South Sudan, there has been an agenda created by the narrative that is based upon a false fact and a false belief of theirs. I point out that the Secretary General's, the head of UNMISS at the time, said she wasn't convinced by what your president said. Well, you know, that's not the right test, actually, when she's been giving information. She's not in a court of law and having to be convinced. She's told by the president, this has happened this way. This is an attempted coup. That is why our troops are trying to take control. That is why we have a conflict. I mean, when those events happened, those planning it, it must have been foreseeable to them that there would be conflict, people would be killed, and that given the very fragile relationships within your society, that it could explode into something more. You bear responsibility for that. As a government, you're told to get it under control and that peace must be restored, but actually you're in the middle of a fight against a party that wants to take control. That's the context. So this needs to be very, very carefully considered, as I said, and why I call for pressing of the reset button.
Yes, Mubir Cirillo.
Yes, thank you. My name is George Shir. I work with Al Arabiya and Al Hadath. report, did you find any coup attempt that was happened within the first event, 15 December 2013? This is my first question. My second question is the victims. Some of them were killed, and others are surviving now. The criminals, the accusers are free, and some of them are part of this government. So you as expert, how are you going to advise the government to deal with this report? My third question to Mr. Atem. So why now this report? Thank you.
Okay. First of all, Mabur Cyril, we have actually listened carefully. You realize the first questions was sufficiently answered because it is alluding to how, okay, whether there was an attempted coup. Within the intercept, Stephen has explicitly stated that given the evidence he has looked at, there was an attempted coup in both 2013 and 2016. I don't think there is any answer that is going to be better than that. Concerning as to the questions you asked as to why now, this is the best timing for making people of South Sudan to understand what happened in 2013 and 2016, because it's looking like there would be a recurrence of the same situation as those who were actually perpetrating the attempted coup in 2013 and 2016 are actively working to undermine the implementation of the peace agreement that we are all here now to implement. So people of South Sudan need to be informed so that when a repeat of 2013 and 2016 happen, God forbid, then South Sudanese will be able to understand who is actually perpetrating it. I think that is why the report has been timed to happen now, not tomorrow.
Yes, well, you can see in the report the political build-up to the attempted coup, and then on the 14th of December you see the plan come into operation, and then between 8:30 and 9:30 in the evening on the 15th of December you see the orders that were given. And let's be frank about this, you issue a spark and you light a fire. And the conflict that then went on over a number of days became a serious battle. What about the participants, you've asked? As an outsider, what I have observed, if this is of use to you, is that you have great pressure from the international community, and I've cited these in the reports, to reconcile, to make peace, to stop this. And you've got to somehow find the means and ways as a leader, as a politician, to try and stop the other side from fighting. So the issuing of pardons to the people that were named by the South Sudanese police when they investigated the matter was probably a necessary political decision by the president at the time. From my position, I've been able to see all the international pressures around and what statements were being made and how it was being viewed. So these are very difficult decisions, but what they do impress upon me, I suppose, is that a Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, whereby these facts and details become examined and looked at, and the truth archived, are very important for a society that has had conflict. And in a way, I suppose this kind of evidence is the sort of evidence that a Truth, Justice and Reconciliation and Healing Commission would be interested to receive and consider carefully.
This that take, Stephen? Yeah. The South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you.
Yes, I have two questions. Question number one is about the report itself. There are voices that say that the report is one-sided. Could there have been part of the report that have been omitted? That's one. And two, to pick up on just the question that you have asked, there's a part of it which was not clearly answered, maybe also attention to answer it, is about the victims. 2-3 days ago, on the same podium, the President pardoned those whose name might have appeared in the report of any allegation that might have been arisen in the report. So what do you think would be the plight of the victims if those whose name appeared in this report have already been pardoned by any tribe?
The report's not one-sided. The report just produces facts. And this report was not edited or sent to South Sudan or viewed by anyone who was from South Sudan before I put it into a PDF and finalised it. It simply wasn't read, vetted, input made by anyone from South Sudan. It is the work of my team and myself from the materials that we were given access to and were able to consider. So it's not one-sided, it's actually telling about, at the start, political conflict between two leaders, but then it goes into the significance of the violence. And I'm afraid by saying, oh, it's one-sided, you're actually in denial about what happened. You're actually putting yourself into a state of denial. You're ignoring what happened, wanting to hear another story that you can follow. The facts are the facts. And that's what has been set out. And you must remember that. In relation to the victims, my job isn't to do any more on this report. I have just produced it, analysed the evidence, and circulated it as it corrected what was not true. And that was the purpose of the report.
Again, what actually happened in 2013 and 2016, apart from the legal aspect of it, it was a political crisis that requires political settlement through the signing of the revitalized agreement or resolution of conflict in the country, which we are now implementing. So that document has provided ABCD on how to deal with making the country to be peaceful and making the country to account to those crimes that were committed during the 2013 and 2016. Truth, Healing, Reconciliation Commission, which is about to be established, because like other countries that had a similar situation before, is the one that will examine those evidence and provide the way how the victim could be actually reparated, compensated, And that will be the work of the people of South Sudan, because the truth, healing, and reconciliation is a bottom-up approach, which will require all the South Sudanese to be able to take part in that process. But meanwhile, we are actually implementing the peace agreement or resolution of conflict in the country. That is Waki Simon.
Yes.
For the Bloomsburg or for VOA?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Atene and Mr. Stephen for speaking on the report. I have one or two questions to Stephen and the other one is to Atene. Mr. Stephen, would you mind telling us how much your company was paid to work on this report? That's the first question. The second one is, the conflict involved parties. Now, one party commissioned your company to work on this report. What do you comment on observers who say your report is not fair because you were commissioned by one party only to a conflict? My question to Honorable Atene, why has the report been declassified? And lastly, it is not on this, but on the peace agreement, is that there is this stalemate in recent days between the SPLMIO and the SPLMIG. The SPLMIO pulled it out from the security mechanisms, and recently, I think when we spoke to them, they are not yet back. I would like to understand if at all any initiative or attempt has started to mitigate this, like saying the president and the first vice president, there are efforts for them, to come together, talk, and fix this issue. Thank you.
First of all, why the materials in this report were actually declassified is to allow the investigation that has taken place, and particularly the report in questions, to be released and be now made public, so that whoever that was denying there was an attempted coup in 2013 and in 2016 can easily view those facts. And I think the report was about fact. As in regards to the almost political stalemate that occurred in the last few days, I cannot call them political stalemate, because President Salva Kiir issued a decree trying to officiate the security chapter within the security protocol within the agreement by appointing the high-ranking officials into the army from the opposition forces. Dr. Riak, responding to the presidential decree, he never waited to have an audience with the president. He issued statements calling the presidential order a violation of the agreement. So the chaos that happened, not the chaos, the panicking that happened simply because the leader of the IO rejected, who is the first vice president, rejected the order of the president. And reading from the line, between the line, people of South Sudan, can vividly recall when the leader of SPLM-IO reject a document that he was better placed to discuss with the president without people knowing what are the repercussions of that rejection. Owing to this, the president, because there are peace spoilers in the country, the forces that were on the street, they were not there to intimidate anyone. the forces were placed on the street in order to prevent who would be feast spoiler that can get in between the partners and start a war again. But in the few days to come, the presidency will be convened, in which Dr. Riek Machar and the other peace partners will converge on to the office of the president to address issues, and you will be informed accordingly. Thank you.
The question about one party to the conflict commissioned the report, why didn't I speak to the other party? That wasn't the issue. The issue was whether there was evidence of an attempted coup on the 15th of December 2013 and the 8th of July 2016. If there had not been evidence of an attempted coup, I would have said so. So it's not a question of me providing a report to suit one party. I'm afraid you're looking at it through one lens yourself. I was actually looking at it on the basis of whether there was evidence or not. And for that reason, looking at the investigation commission records of interviews of various people involved during the events, as I said, mutually corroborated each separate source of evidence. So it is corroborated evidence. And that's the point I make. If there had been evidence taken by that commission that contradicted the intercepts, I would have looked further and further. But actually it corroborates. Whoever wants to respond to the report is free to do so. I don't know whether the tapes will be made available on put out. I don't want to inflame things any further, but people perhaps should consider their responses. And I'm not going to answer the question over money. I've already dealt with that, and it's not the issue. I'm here to talk about the report.
I think that should be the last questions.
I'm under time pressure.
Yeah, that's the last question.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel Akilio from Ireland.
Emmanuel Akilio.
Yes. As a nationalist, I want to appreciate you for taking the time, first of all, to try to help reveal the truth about the event 2013 and 2016. Thank you for that. However, you talked about evidence. That was your point. And what you wrote is a transcript of an audio. So I'm wondering, do you still have the recordings? You know, we're journalists. Do you still have the recordings? And is it possible you can share the recordings with us? Secondly, how long did it take actually for you to complete this report, the time, duration? And the other question goes to probably Attain, and I will connect it with you, Stephen, because you earlier talked about the AU did not really take enough time to analyze this report. So I'm really wondering from the government side, did you give the same recordings to the AU Commission on Inquiry, or did they ask you for the same recordings, or you gave different recordings to Stephen?
I think that question he has already answered.
I can answer that for you, because it's actually in the report. It's the same recordings. It's a very good question, because I was concerned about it. As to whether the AU had seen that, and I particularly located the audio that they were supplied with, and I think I can't remember the number now off the top of my head, but it was imprinted on my brain a month ago. So I particularly, in the AU Commission report, they refer, I think it's about paragraph 134, to an audio that they received, and and I located that audio and listened to it, and it to me was quite clear what it had said, so I was baffled by their reaction. The audio came along with a CD-ROM of the same audios I'd been told as the ones I had. But the one that they cite in the report, they said they only looked at one, couldn't understand it. We cite that in the report itself. Yes, the audios are there that are downloads are in existence still. And I've just put what I've reviewed, which is if it's a transcript, it's a transcript. If it's an audio, those are identified as audios in the report. As far as the others are concerned, there may still be audios of those. This report took about 3 or 4 months. It wasn't a great deal of time. And for reasons of economy of resource, I did not want to spend too long on everything. Once I had the picture and sufficient evidence, the report was produced, as well as the context of what was happening at the time. So there's the answers to those questions.
Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen of the press, honorable ministers, the press conference this afternoon has come to an end with this remark. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.
Thank you.